What's up, everybody? Today's episode of the Reuben Show, we're going to talk all about boxing and what we saw this past weekend with what do they call that? That day of reckoning, right? Where you had a bunch of these cards in Saudi Arabia. It was interesting. It was some good fights, but and we're going to talk about Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, but let's first talk about the what is happening different in boxing. Now, one of the things that's different, and I'm sure they've done this before, but one of the things that's interesting is this idea that if you had a central location to have all these fights and just pay one pay-per-view, I don't want to join your program. I don't want to join a bunch of programs. Maybe I'll join one, but I don't want to have to pay a monthly fee for all these places and still pay for a fight. Okay. That's kind of one of the things that I was looking at where I was I got this fight on ESPN Plus. Now I subscribe to ESPN Plus and I get the UFC fights and I get all that other stuff. And so one of the things that was interesting is how people say, yeah, I want to see the fights, but I don't want to have to join or subscribe, or I want to have to pay all these other fees and buy the fight. So I get it, right? So for this particular fight, which was co-sponsored by the DAZN network and I guess and UFC Plus, and it was, in Saudi Arabia. So the times were the price of the fight was reasonable, and I didn't have to go anywhere else. I didn't have to subscribe to the Zone network to watch this fight. I just had to buy it, and that's what I want. I don't want to have to. And if more of these companies are starting to realize that the more eyeballs you get on there, right? So subscriber base depends on how many people are going to watch your fight. So if all you had was ESPN people, if all you had was um people from the Zone, people from Showtime, if all you had was people from that subscriber base, you're not going to have the viewership and you're not going to escape the bubble of the apps. The bubble of the apps is a real problem, right? You have the DAZN network fighters and you have a bunch of them now, but you don't have all of them. So then if you have one giant superstar that is not part of your network, that waters down the quality of fights that you can book because you're not going to be able to book these other people. And so that being said, that's what you saw here. You saw, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua. You saw all these people fight. Joseph Parker. These are people that are starting to have well-known names. But there's other fighters that maybe are not part of that network that you would want to see them match up and fight against each other. That's kind of the beauty of the UFC. If we show the parallels, right? Is the UFC in itself is not a better product in the sense that these exciting fights are what people want to see. People want to see the top fight the top. The Super Bowl. Everybody wants to see the Super Bowl boxing matches. And in the UFC, the way that they've gone about doing it is they kind of recruit all the top little fighters and they build their careers up, they build their persona up, and they build all this stuff up, and they get to that point. So the state of boxing itself, I think, is starting to realize they're starting to see and realize that you have to be able to centralize a way in which everybody can see these fights done. And I think that that's important. I think there's a huge level of importance to this where you have these type of matchups and you can actually see the value in it, where you can see the top level fighters fighting each other. I mean, that's all you want to see. That's what the most interesting thing is. Two undefeated people. You see people that, they're just quality fighters. You want to see all that kind of stuff. And so if you start going that direction and allow these different promotions to have their fighters fight each other, you're going to see the quality of viewership go up. And it's going to take a while, by the way, folks, until this adjustment really takes place. It's not going to happen overnight. It might not even happen over a course of years. It's going to take a while to kind of condition people, just like you've conditioned people to go to see a boxing match and they accept the prices and they accept the environment. They accept that the beers are going to cost so much. They accept all this stuff. So it takes a long time to condition people in acceptance of a way of enjoying their entertainment. The movie experience, we can go down the list of a bunch of things that this has happened to. And I think that some of these big companies, they want to lock down these fighters to kind of squash the extreme payouts. But what it does is that it hurts these fighters. It hurts their brand because again, if all you are on DAZN and you don't have the ability to fight anybody out of that network, then you're only going to be a champ of the app. And a boxing champ of a single app or a single network, it's not really a champ. And none of those belts even count. See, that's the difference, right? None of those belts even count because if you're not fighting all the good people, if all the top level people are not fighting each other, then is that champion really valid? And that's a good part of this segment of the video. Are those champions real? If you can't fight outside of your network, so then you just become a champion of the DAZN network. You become a champion of Showtime, of which is no longer, but you become a champion of HBO, of ESPN, of Matchroom, or whatever these groups are. You become a champion only of that, and it doesn't really count. The belts are not valid if they can't fight everybody in boxing. So, what are your thoughts on that? That this is an interesting kind of concept where it's like you can't can you be a champion if you don't have access to all the champions? And that's a huge question. I think that's a big mystery of why boxing suffers. I think the suffering of boxing, even though it's a good product and people are going the right direction, but you have all the fighters on Golden Boy. And if they're exclusive to a certain app, they can't fight outside of the app. They can't afford it. They can't get bought out. They can't do this. They can't do that. All these deals can't be made. So it literally invalidates all of these belts. You can have 5 WBO, WBC, WB, blah, 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 the ring belt, the this and that, the intercontinental, all this other stuff. If the fighter can't fight consistently for all the belts, it makes none of these belts even matter. And that's the real question of boxing is where does the value lay into segregating these fighters? You control them and you create these fights that really don't look appealing because you're trying to hoodwink the public, right? Hoodwinking the public is what's happening with these fighters that can't go out of their little circle, their app. A fighter that can't go out of the zone is not going to be really a valid fighter. In the sense that he can't be a champion because you're not undisputed. And if you say that you're not really undisputed because you can't fight other people, because fights get canceled because people just are not willing to make the fights. It's interesting that we've accepted this for so many years, and there's kind of that deal, right? Are fighters real champions if they can't fight all the fighters, all the people that are potentially champions? And that's it, and I spent about 8 or 9 minutes on this, but that's what you saw where I can buy the DAZN fight on ESPN, which means I don't have to subscribe to another app. If I subscribe to one, because ESPN's pretty good because I get a lot of different sports and a lot of stuff is offered to me. I was okay with buying that fight because I didn't have to go somewhere else to get that fight. So if you want me to purchase, and it was a reasonable price, by the way, that price was reasonable. It wasn't 70, $80. I could give you $40 to have all these. And there was a lot of good fights. And I'm going to talk about these fights in my next segment here. But what are your thoughts on that? Right? Are champions two true champions in boxing if they can't fight everybody in their weight class because of contractual obligations, because of the apps, not letting them go out of their deals? It's a good question, right? So next, okay, so there's that subject, right? Of boxing. I want to talk about these fights specifically, right? And there was 2 fights. You have the 2 main cards. There was other good heavyweight fights, but let me just talk about these 2 main cards, right? So you have on the on the second to main card, the co-main event, I guess you want, whatever, it doesn't matter. You could call it whatever you want, but you had Anthony Joshua, you had Deontay Wilder fighting. Um, you had wait, hold on here. Deontay Wilder fighting Joseph Parker, right? I have these guys queued up here on the thing, right? So Joseph Parker, here's the thing about the Deontay Wilder fight and Joseph Parker fight, right? So here what's interesting about this, right? Is you have Deontay Wilder that has been coming off some losses. He's kind of on the crossroads of his career. He's 38 years old. He's not a young man. He had a bunch of knockouts. He had a battle with Tyson Fury and he lost it. He got some losses. And his record speaks for itself. He's a very accomplished fighter. He is 43-2-1 before this fight with Joseph Parker. Now, Joseph Parker is like on the other end of it, right? But Deontay Wilder took some losses to Tyson Fury. He won. He had a warm-up fight and got the victory. And the frequency that he's been fighting is telling us that he's kind of at the tail end of his career. He has a family. He's made a ton of money. And here's the thing about boxing. The minute that the money starts flowing, and it does, right? These fighters can make outrageous amounts of money worldwide. If you become a worldwide superstar, if you encompass the globe and you have an audience all over the world like Anthony Joshua does, you could demand high paydays, but you also are like extremely marketable. And so a guy like Deontay Wilder had these basically 3 giant battles with Tyson Fury. He didn't come out on top on those, but those are huge paydays each one. He probably made $100 million. I don't know what he made, but it's probably $100 million between all the fights, right? And he's probably made a couple $100 million in his career. He's been a knockout fighter, very entertaining, very charismatic. He's a true prize fighter. But now, all this talk about him taking ayahuasca and, going on a trip of fighting himself, all that stuff is a real thing and it all kind of affects you, right? And so he's now kind of drank the sauce of it's not worth it to fight. He doesn't want to get CTE. He wants to end his career on a positive note. He's had, what is he at, 47 fights now? Is he going to fight much longer? I want to say no. And in this fight, and I want to talk about Joseph Parker to set up this fight and why it happened the way it did, is you have, now let's examine Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker, very accomplished fighter. What is his record, right? He's 34-3. He's lost to Joe Joyce. He lost to Anthony Joshua. He lost to Dylan White. These are all journeyman fighters, right? They're on the cusp of being prize fighters. And Joseph Parker he's almost there. Now, he's an older fighter, right? But let's see what he is. He's 31. Actually, he's a young fighter. He's 31 years old. He's got about another 5 or 6 years left in him, right? He fought Deontay Wilder and beat him. He boxed up this match between them two, whereas they were kind of opposite trajectories in their career in boxing. And so when one of them was, Joseph Parker is like, he's had some losses, he bounced back. And, sometimes these losses, they kind of just, you can't recover from. He's had a couple warm-up fights with people, but, because of recently, last couple of years, the frequency that you fight matters, right? The frequency. So Joseph Parker, this was his third fight this year. In 2022, he fought 1 time. In 2021, he fought 3 times. So he's fought since 2021, he's fought a total of 7 times. That activity level matters. The reason why that activity level matters, if you look in history, the fighters, and this happens in the UFC too, in MMA, but in boxing, if you stay active 3 times a year and you keep beating everybody and you keep winning, there eventually is no more people for you to fight. And you have to get shots at the title, right? So he won a vacant IBF and WO Intercontinental Heavyweight title in his last fight against Simon Keane. Then he fought Deontay Wilder. So he retained those belts, whatever those belts mean. But him fighting Deontay Wilder is kind of like, these are almost like a passing of the torch fights, right? Deontay Wilder if he would have got the victory, he would have been in line for all these other big fights, Anthony Joshua fight, so forth and so on, because that's kind of the fight that was supposed to happen. But Joseph Parker is a game opponent. Hell, he's got 34 wins now. He had 33 wins and he had 23 knockouts, 11 by decision. So he's not a rookie fighter. Joseph Parker was a very game fighter. And so Deontay Wilder saw this as a good payday, but I think Deontay Wilder, and in his fight, he was very hesitant, very hesitant. He was very skittish for his activity level. And Joseph Parker obviously wanted this fight. Joseph Parker saw this as his opportunity at 31 years old to say to myself, I got 7 years now. If I could get this victory, now I can get the Anthony Joshua fight. If win, lose, or draw, now I could get the Tyson Fury rematch, right? Because I think he fought Tyson Fury. Where's this at here? I think he fought Tyson Fury a long time. Yeah, no. He never fought Tyson Fury. So Joseph Parker versus Tyson Fury, that's a good fight. That could potentially fight for June or July. Now, Joseph Parker should probably do a warm-up fight. So that's the mindset, right? Joseph Parker's like, I got all this in front of me. Now, if I beat Deontay Wilder, which he did, now I can maybe get the Anthony Joshua fight. If I could get that fight, if for some reason I could get the victory on that, because that's going to be a tough one, because Anthony Joshua looked really good. And we'll get on him next, right? I got about another 5 minutes on this one. But anyways, so Deontay Wilder just looked real skittish. He looked like he wasn't into it. He was in shape. He didn't look like he was at tip-top shape. He looked like this was supposed to be a warm-up fight for him, but he just really was struggling with getting active. He seemed like, because of his ring rust, he wasn't as alive. He wasn't at true prize fighter form. Prize fighter form, when I say that, is that these are the guys that they don't really warm up. They just get it going. It becomes an entertaining fight right off the bat. Tyson Fury's, Anthony Joshua's, all these guys that are at the top level, they know how to keep active. They know how to keep the fight interesting. It's this weird thing that these people do, that these fighters do. The prize fighters know how to keep it going. They know how to have very little boring rounds. And that's interesting to say, because I can't explain it per se, right? But being able to explain it doesn't really do it any justice, right? Where it's like, you want to be in that good level, but at the same token, it's like, you want to see if, so what you do is that these prize fighters, they mix the technical aspect of fighting. And Joseph Parker did this, where he kept it active. Now, Deontay Wilder, who's usually on the other side of this, was the one that was stagnant or stalling or not looking as active as maybe he should. So there's that kind of weird dynamics, right? Where usually Deontay Wilder, and they mentioned this in the fight, by the way, and I watched the whole fight, and it was an interesting fight, and Deontay Wilder came alive at the end, but he was hesitant, and then he talked about this whole ayahuasca thing, and then, it just was a really kind of weird situation to see Deontay Wilder fight with not the prize fighter mentality installed in him. I don't know what it is, but that's the gist of that's the feeling that I got. I watched the whole fight. And Deontay Wilder didn't win that fight, but it didn't seem like he was interested in winning that fight. He was interested in, it's like he wasn't living in the moment, that this is your huge opportunity to get back to the mountaintop. I don't know I think he looked distracted, if I'm being honest. And that's kind of the lack of focus in these fighters. It's crazy, because if you don't lack focus, and the other guy comes to fight, Joseph Parker came to fight, and he took control of the fight. He was doing everything that kind of Deontay Wilder would do. So is this Joseph Parker's prize fighter coming out fight, where he's like, I can entertain the masses. I can be somebody that everybody wants to see. And that's what I thought was interesting about Joseph Parker. Right. I think that he has a chance now. He's got to get out there and make videos. He's got to get out there and do interviews. He's got to get out there and do something and announce his next fight and tell people that he's going to keep on fighting. He's going to stay active, and he wants these other fights. I think a good warm-up fight for him next, because he got this victory. He stood the course. He's only 31 years old. He's a young man, right? And he's got 7 or 8 years of really big fights in him left. He just got to keep it going. I would like to see him active for this year of 3 fights again. 3 fights, 2 warm up and a big one, whether it's Joshua, Tyson Fury in September, but definitely stay active, get some warm up fights, get some of these younger guys some notoriety, and be the prize fighter and keep making the interviews and keep being out there in the spotlight. The biggest deal, the spotlight. Joseph Parker, you did it. You proved the point, right? You have a record, you have some losses, but it's okay though. You were an entertaining fighter. Kudos to you. Deontay Wilder, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. It seems like he's kind of at the tail end of his career. He's made a ton of money, and kudos to Deontay Wilder because he had some crazy knockouts. But anyways, that's about that. So the main event was Anthony Joshua, right? Who was having kind of this weird thing, right? He's 34. He's in the middle of his kind of end of his kind of like, you're kind of like 30 to 40-year-old thing for the heavyweights is kind of like where you make all your money. You got rid of those old contracts and you fight this guy, Otto Wallen, who's a very accomplished fighter. Anthony Joshua is, the big draw. He really is. He has a clean personal life for the most part. And, he had a really great record. He lost to Andy Ruiz. He got that win back. He lost to Usyk, the current champion, who's going to fight Tyson Fury in February, which is going to be one of the biggest fights because that will literally unify all the belts. He lost twice to him, right? That was in 21 and 22. He fought twice in 22, and this was his second fight in 23. So he's staying relatively active, right? 2 fights a year. Again, I don't know if that's enough. And 3 fights a year, I think, is a great number for you to kind of clean out the divisions, stay active. You don't have any worries. It forces these promoters to put fights on for you. It forces you to be in the spotlight in the kind of lexicon of sports, the search engine, Google. You're going to be in there prominently, right? And Anthony Joshua figured it out, right? This was a good fight, but he seemed like he was mentally there. Just like I talked about how Deontay Wilder wasn't mentally checked in. Anthony Joshua was mentally checked into this fight. He knew that he was going to fight this guy that was a very game fighter, right? You got Otto Wallen is 33 years old, right? He's not a rookie, right? And he's got 26 wins. He's 26-2, right? He was 26-1 at the time. 26-1, no contest, right? He lost to Tyson Fury too. But he's had a couple wins, right? Since 2020, he's had 3-6. This was a 7th fight since 2020. So it's a mid-level of activity, right? You figure 2 fights a year, right? More or less, right? 2023, he fought 3 times. So Wallen needs to get back on the horse and fight again, right? Another 3 fights, he'll get some more ring time, he'll get more experience, and he'll get to that point. Now, Anthony Joshua, his mindset, now somebody like Anthony Joshua's caliber, because he's 34 years old, it could have went a bunch of different ways, right? But one of the things that's interesting about him is, he's had 3 wins. He fought 3 times in 2023. Now, some of these other guys that he's beaten, they haven't been the hugest names, but he's building it up, right? He's building it up, right? I think the 2 losses to Usyk, 1 in 21 and 1 in 22, and then he fought Andy Ruiz and got those fights. It's like Joshua kind of had this weird he was kind of floating. He kind of didn't know where he was going with it. And he's a huge draw. He's internationally famous. Anthony Joshua is the guy, right? He's sponsored by Under Armour. I mean, he's the stereotypical prize fighter. And you want him to see him be successful and have the energy. And you can see the compare and contrast to him versus Deontay Wilder. While Wilder's a little bit older, I don't know that Wilder would be up for fighting Joshua because Joshua looked like he kind of reset himself mentally. Sometimes they do that by just kind of taking extended time off. Sometimes they do that by changing trainers, changing location, changing where they live. And I'm sure that Joshua has done some of that because he did something. Because some of these other fights that he had, the Andy Ruiz fight, the first one, and the Usyk fight, it seemed like he was a little bit checked out. Right? It could be what was going on from, 2021, 22. Could have been all that, but he fought 3 times this year. Are the fighters super popular, super well known? No. And the reason why he can get away with that, is because of the fact that he's such a huge draw on his own. So if the fight ever happens where he fights Tyson Fury, right? If he gets to fight Tyson Fury, Joseph Parker hasn't fought Tyson Fury. I would like to see Joseph Parker fight Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. I think Joshua's already beat Joseph Parker, but Tyson Fury is not getting any younger. He's 35 years old. So that fight needs to start developing, or Tyson Fury and him, because of getting these victories, Joshua needs another big fight. But I like to see Joshua fight 3 times again this year, have 2 warm-up fights and 1 big one, and maybe in 25 or 26, Tyson Fury and him should fight. If if Tyson Fury can get through Usyk and unify all the belts, then Anthony Joshua can fight him. You have Andy Ruiz can fight him. You have Joseph Parker. Those are 3 good fights for Tyson Fury that'll probably end his career. And what I mean by that is retirement, right? So Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury is the fight to see. That's going to get all the eyeballs. And I think that Anthony Joshua in this fight against Otto Wallin, who was a game fighter, but he doesn't, his personality, he's not there yet, right? He doesn't have the personality appeal that is universal that Anthony Joshua has. So Anthony Joshua is a huge draw. Tyson Fury is a huge draw, and that fight would do huge numbers. Now you want to build up to that, and you don't want there to be restrictions in terms of, the promoters. Oh, I don't want this to be this and that. So now that if Tyson Fury gets this win, then you get rid of a heavyweight like Usyk, who doesn't have the international appeal that Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury have. And that's the thing that benefits Anthony Joshua a lot, is his huge draw. He goes in London, the O2 Arena, sells that out, goes to Saudi Arabia, does well. He can go anywhere and sell out. I'm sure if he has a fight in the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, it's going to sell out. Hell, he can have a fight in Dallas Cowboy Stadium that holds 93,000. He could probably sell that out in the Tyson Fury fight. They could probably sell that out. That would be huge. But Anthony Joshua, to put a cap on this, he did what he was supposed to do, and he was aggressive. He was prize fighter aggressive. He did not want to just let the fight go by and let things happen. He was interested in getting this victory. And I like to see that. I love to see that. It was a very interesting thing. You saw the level of activity that Anthony Joshua was displaying, where he was letting you know, I'm a prize fighter. I'm not going to take rounds off per se. I'm going to try to make this interesting and use my technique and frame it as a prize fighter, where you're not only an accomplished fighter, but you're using that showmanship like Muhammad Ali did, like the Mike Tysons do, where it's a show, right? It's an event. And true prize fighters like the Conor McGregors, Floyd Mayweathers, they make this all an event. And that's what true prize fight. Oscar De La Hoya, you have all these fighters, right? And be willing to give interviews, be willing to talk, be vulnerable, give your time up. That's the thing. That's a challenge. And we're going to wrap this up in a minute here. Is Anthony Joshua, when you get into the rank of true prize fighter, right? You have to give all these interviews. You have to give up a lot of your time. So you have to juggle your training, your focus with being in the spotlight, and you have to also do what you're supposed to do. See, that's what's interesting about the whole thing. Everybody thinks that these fight, like Anthony Joshua, like a Tyson Fury, they get pulled in 70 different directions. And in those 70 different directions, you're still able to accomplish your goal. So anyways, I thought it was a good fight. So what are your thoughts on all these things? I'm going to try to post these in separate videos, but like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Comment in the videos. And yeah, talk to you guys later.